think ambition creates a pathway. It gives you a purpose in life, and without it, you can drift along. On Squawk Box Europe, we cover 3 hours of live breaking events. It keeps me at the top of my game, having to react instantly to these developing events.
The unapologetically ambitious voice there of Karen Tso, Australian-born business journalist and co-anchor of CNBC's flagship show, Squawk Box Europe, which broadcasts worldwide 5 days a week, bookending the opening of European equity markets. That video, recorded for CNBC's Live Ambitiously campaign, conveys something of the drive, focus and force of will which have served Karen so well in a career carved out in what is still one of the most male-dominated branches of journalism there is. Where did that ambition come from, I wondered? Was there something in her childhood that had set her on her current path?
It's funny, my producer asked me this the other day because he was talking about my sister, and I revealed that she was a chief financial officer, and he said to me, was there something about having a Chinese father who owned a restaurant that led to the story for your sister and for yourself? Which made me think about it. Well, maybe there was something in that. So my father was a migrant, so he moved to Australia from China, and he had nothing, and he started out a restaurant. And at the time, it was a cafe that used to heat food in a microwave. It then became a full-scale buffet. And eventually, by the time he wrapped up after 30 years, it was a fine dining restaurant. But at that point, over the years, and we had different clientele, different customers. And, as children and teenagers and young women, my sister and I worked in this restaurant, everything from peeling prawns to doing the dishes for the buffet. And I've got to say, there are a lot of dishes when people go to buffets, to, hosting and running the restaurant. And over the years, we just met a mix of people. It was business people, it was politicians, because it was a restaurant that was right across from Parliament House. So we were privy to some incredible political conversations, and we were so used to talking to very senior business people, and back in the day, businessmen, about how their day was going and all the topics that they were talking about. So I think perhaps being exposed to business and politics at such a young age took my sister and I in that direction. So perhaps it was something, around those early years, the work ethic, realizing that a restaurant lifestyle was not a 9 to 5 job. So you got used to doing whatever hours were required by the job. So there are no parameters. I think a lot of people have more traditional jobs, 9 to 5 or 9 to 6 hour lunch break, go into an office. That was just not my experience. And I think it was somewhat eye-opening to realize you could do something different with your life.
And at the moment, that something different is fronting Squawk Box Europe, CNBC's show covering the opening of the European markets, which means in practice that you're there for 3 hours in the morning. It's a really long stint, isn't it? Responding to the current affairs stories of the day as they break and interpreting them in terms of the markets. So you've got people tuning in who are going to be making their investment decisions for the day based on what you say. And those investment decisions, of course, have real life implications in terms of the economy and jobs. So it must be really stressful.
We take it seriously. Now you've made me nervous about my coverage of a morning. But I think it's because we've covered markets for so long, and I talk about myself and my co-anchor, Steve Sedgwick. We've both been in the business for a very long time. And I think it's the experience that counts, which is why there's not exactly nerves. Every story, in many ways, we've seen several times before, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. And you've amassed that experience, Karen, whilst working in a domain which is typically dominated by men. I think that when many people think of the markets and trading, then they probably think of either Leonardo DiCaprio in The Wolf of Wall Street or the Bull of Wall Street statue. Is it really the testosterone-fueled environment that people take it for?
So from the outset, even as a business reporter, a cub reporter, I wanted to move from general news to the business desk, and it was a desk that only men had sat on. There were no female financial reporters when I started out, so that was unusual from the outset. And you're right, and most CEOs over the years of my career have mostly been men. That has evolved over recent years, and you can see it in terms of people who come in to be interviewed. I think we have seen, even in our own coverage over the years, when we've gone to moderate panels, they've been all male panels. There's been a lot of pushback over the years too, I think, from different businesses, and ours are no different now, where we're saying enough is enough. On events that we go and moderate, we ask for diversity on the panel. So that's changed. I think when you go to big industry events, and I was just at one the other week, a big technology event, when I first started going to that 12 years ago, there were barely any women. If there were women there, they were doing some sort of promotional role, not in any professional capacity. Thankfully, that's changed. And I go to events now, and there are technology founders that are female. There are CEOs that are female. There are CFOs, there are CTOs. So it is changing, but not quickly enough. And I think for anyone with children, I've got a daughter, you want to ensure that that's going to change for their generation. And the stats say that it's not going to be much different. 100 plus years it's going to take to have gender equality, which is very disappointing. So I think we try and do what we can do individually on a daily basis. And for me, it really is about being the best that I can be in still what is a male-dominated environment.
I think I'm hearing echoes of Sheryl Sandberg's lean in philosophy there. But I know, Karen, that you've also been a very vocal advocate for structural change. It's not all about individual women having to work harder and be better, is it?
Quotas, all for it. We haven't seen enough change quickly enough. Positive messaging from CEOs. I've seen fairly significant interventions even by colleagues who are male, trying to ensure that things that people overlook are simply not overlooked anymore. And it makes a real difference. I think it's really important that everybody tries to do something about it. And where I can call something out for not quite being right, I will do it.
Oh, go on, spill the beans.
Just even, and it's not even gender, even diversity in newsrooms. I mean, typically, there hasn't been a lot of diversity. I'm not talking about gender diversity. I'm talking about more widespread demographic diversity in all of the newsrooms I've worked in. I've said previously, why do we not recruit from more diverse pools of talent? And I've worked in, about 5 different newsrooms, 6 different newsrooms over my career. So I think gradually that change is taking place. But I think sometimes if you end up in a more senior position, you just have to say it.
Finally, Karen, it's a classic question, I know, but what advice would you give to young women starting out in their careers today?
Just believing in yourself and working extremely hard, working out what your edge is, how you can be better than the next person, and putting in the effort. My career really has been a lot of hard work, much like being in the kitchen those early days at my parents' restaurant when I was 15, peeling prawns and potatoes. It's been very similar. Everybody thinks television is very glamorous. Most of the time, it's a lot of reading. It's a lot of preparing of notes. It's long days sometimes. So I think just hard work and belief in yourself and absolute determination.
Well, you've brought that interview very skillfully and very beautifully full circle. Karen Tso, thank you very much for joining me.
Well, thank you for the time too.
Karen Tso there, co-anchor of CNBC's flagship business news programme, Squawk Box Europe. We continue our theme of women breaking ground in traditionally male domains now as we head off to Sarajevo to meet the only female watchmaker in Bosnia. Her name is Lamia Sarajevic, and it's not just her gender that makes her work of orological interest. Guy Delorne reports.
My name is Lamia Sarajevic. I come from Sarajevo, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and I own a watchmaker shop here in Sarajevo. For start, it was very hard because I started working when I was 17, and to be a female watchmaker, it's unusual. They always question my capabilities because I'm a woman in a man's job. But now it's okay. It's good. They got used to it, so...
Why were people saying to you that watchmaking isn't a woman's job? Why shouldn't it be a woman's job?
Well, for the centuries, it was always a man's job. So probably that's why they are used to, especially here in Bosnia, they are used to man's watchmaker. So when they see a female, it's strange for them. There is no normal reason, just they're used to it. And this is different. And people here are not used to different things. I think that's why. But now, 20 years after, they're used to me being a watchmaker.
Well, you'd like to hope so, wouldn't you, really, after 20 years? But
Yeah. But still, I have some customers that are like, okay, is there a man here? And yes, what can I say? I just say no. You can find another watchmaker. So that's that. I'm the third generation in my family, so my grandfather, then my father. So I'm just surrounded with watches my whole life. I started coming in the shop, and when I finished elementary school, I said to my parents, I'm going to a watchmaking school in Sarajevo, of course. And my father said, okay, if you are sure, go. And after I finished, they shut down the school.
So you were the final graduate of the watchmaking school of Sarajevo?
Yes, exactly. I was the final.
You have taken watches which have been found on missing people who've been missing from the war in Bosnia in the 90s, and you've restored them for their relatives.
Yes. There were a couple of watches that people brought me, especially from Srebrenica, where they found watches from their fathers, and they brought it. It was all, of course, dirt, and they didn't work, but I managed to give them a new life. It was very emotional, I can say, for me and for them, because they were very happy to have something from their parents or grandparents. So they were happy and sad at the same time. I started working, as you know, with my father. 20 years after, I'm working alone because my father passed 2 years ago. It was a journey when people didn't trust me with their watches. And now they're leaving their watches with confidence. And I have recommendation all over Bosnia. It's great for me to accomplish in these 20 years. And for the next journey, I don't know.
You resisted the temptation to say only time can tell.
Yeah.
That report was by Guy Delorne in Sarajevo, Bosnia. Now, time to wind back our clocks for a moment to last summer. The Spanish national team has won the Women's Football World Cup, only to have their victory marred by this.
Now, Spain's Football Federation has confirmed that its president, Luis Rubiales, has quit. His resignation follows growing protests and pressure after he forcibly kissed Spanish player Jenny Hermoso on the lips as the team celebrated their World Cup final win.
Despite Rubiales' actions, however, interest in female football has continued to grow in Spain, with this season seeing more players take to the pitch than ever before. Ashish Sharma has been meeting some of them.
Well, clearly, girls' football is very much on the rise. I'm in a place where a lot of young teams are here. There are basketball matches taking place. There are also football games about to take place. And I have, just before they go on and play, one team of young girls. Let's start with you, Julieta. How did you become involved in playing football?
Because I saw a lot of boys playing and I perceived that was a very good sport. My brother have already played, my older brother, so I looked at him and I saw that football was an interesting sport. So when I was a little girl, Allegra played football and I copied her because she was a very good player.
Wow, did you know that, Allegra? You're a role model for your friend Juana.
Yes, I am. We were besties, so I said to she, "Do you want to play football with me?" And she liked it, so now she play football with me, Julieta, Nora, and other people. I think that it's better play with girls because if when I played with boys, they didn't pass me the ball. I think that the girls have a lot of power than the boys don't see. And the last year, there were like more girls playing football. I think it was because of the World Cup.
I've actually just got one of the boys that also plays football has joined us. I know that you know these teams. As a boy that plays football, what do you think about girls playing football?
I feel very good because they should always feel welcome to play football with us. And I especially don't like the people that think, oh, because you're a girl, you shouldn't play football.
Things have changed since the World Cup at the highest level of the organisation of Spanish football. Rubiales was eventually not only sacked as the FA president, but has a 3-year ban from all football-related activities. A new coach was announced for the national women's team, and for the first time, a woman is in charge. But Yasmin Mrabet, an international player who plays in Spain's professional league called Liga F for Levante Las Planas, feels there are things that could improve.
For example, the other day was already mentioning how they had just won the World Cup and still the Spanish Federation changed the stadium where they were going to play the semifinals of the Nations League at the last moment, and the stadium was nearly empty. And that game was qualifiers for the Olympics. So it was an important game. In terms of marketing, in terms of visibility, I think there's still a long way to go. The key to this situation basically is to have open communication and be able to speak about what we think can be improved and how we would feel like more comfortable. Everybody has to work together to make women's football work, for it to become a machine that keeps on rolling by itself and sustainable in the long term.
For Jade Bojo, an ex-player and now a delegate for the Players' Union, the Association of Spanish Footballers, one of the biggest changes in the last year has been achieving a basic minimum salary for female players.
El tema económico se solventó, costó muchísimo.
The economic issue was resolved, but it cost a lot. There was a players' strike the very first weekend of this season. The following week, we were able to end that strike because the players eventually secured the deal to have a minimum salary of 21,000 euros per year. But we're still negotiating over issues such as compensation for injury or death and retirement plans. Also, the issue of travel. It's important that players don't have to travel to games in an inappropriate way, and that they can compete on equal terms.
The worst that we saw was the disgraceful behaviour of Luis Rubiales. A man who was meant to represent Spanish football ended up representing nothing more than the ego of macho chauvinism. That female Spanish players have overcome attitudes like this to go on and win the World Cup, and then beyond that grow the sport in the country at all age levels, is a tribute to what they've achieved, despite having every obstacle thrown at them. Ashish Sharma, DW, Madrid.
It is about to get smoky in a second as we strip off and join Estonia's smoke sauna sisterhood. Intrigued? Stay listening. That's Here With Me, Kate Laycock, on Inside Europe. Enough with the smoke and mirrors. Let's get to the smoke and saunas. Smoke Sauna Sisterhood is a multi-award-winning documentary from Estonian filmmaker Anna Hints. The film, which won Hints the Best Director Prize at the Sundance Film Festival, was shot over the course of 7 years in a cabin in the woods where a group of women meet regularly to take a traditional smoke sauna. This is the Smoke Sauna Sisterhood of the title, a space of healing and of revelation. This report from Ben Batka.
We sweat out all the pain. We sweat out all the fear. A group of women in a smoke sauna chant in Estonian. Their nude bodies are covered in beads of sweat. As the chanting and humming get louder, the women rhythmically clap their hands and stomp their feet on the sweat-soaked wood. After several minutes, the chanting reaches its climactic crescendo with the women yelling, "Pain out!" before they leave the steam-filled cabin and jump into a nearby lake to cool down their raw bodies. Rituals like these are at the heart of Estonia's 800-year-old smoke sauna tradition. They're also part of an Estonian movie currently reaping awards and accolades like no other Estonian film before it, Smoke Sauna Sisterhood, a 90-minute experience of a group of women sharing stories and secrets inside a cramped sauna cabin in an Estonian forest. Anna Hinz, the 41-year-old director of the film, says the genesis of her documentary was an experience she had during her childhood.
My grandfather had just died, and I remember his body was in the farmhouse in the countryside. And one day before funeral, we went to smoke sauna. It was my granny, my aunt, my niece. And then there my granny revealed that grandfather had actually cheated on her, not just once, but several times. And she released all the emotions connected with that. I remember there was a lot of hurt and pain. And once we went out, we put clothes on. I felt that Granny had made peace with grandfather, so that next day we could bury a grandfather in peace.
Inside the womb-like sauna, the women, who are primarily middle-aged and older, speak freely among themselves about sex, motherhood, sickness, grief, trauma, and, in one scene, unsolicited dick pics.
Ja nüüd, kuidas ma olen avastanud, et see on kõige mõnusam asend magamiseks, kerin veel siia.
There is no judgment, no interruption or advice. Instead, there is patience, safety, and healing through communion. To Hinz and many other Estonians, a smoke sauna is a sacred place that is all about hearing uncomfortable truths in sometimes uncomfortable temperatures.
When I started to make the film, then I thought that the most important is the courage to share the uncomfortable, the most embarrassing, the most painful, our biggest fears and so on. You enter and you wash your body and your soul, wash off the shame and pain and heal traumas. But when I did the film, then I realized a starting point is actually the courage to hear the uncomfortable.
Close to the end, Hinz shares her own trauma, being raped as a teenager while hitchhiking. She was suicidal, broken, and had a huge social phobia.
Ukse juurde võtabki selle ukse lahti ja siis tal on nuga on käes.
It was movies that gave her life direction and purpose and allowed her to embark on her own healing journey. After studying literature, folklore, and photography, she decided to go to film school and give her dream to become a filmmaker a shot. In 2015, while visiting a monastery, she had a vision for a film in which a place like a smoke sauna would provide a safe healing space for a sisterhood to share their voice. In one of her recent Instagram posts, she described it as breaking the shackles of shame that have held women back for far too long, one screening at a time.
For me and for our culture, so Southeast Estonia, it is not linear, it is cyclic. And when you have cyclic understanding of time, then it gives different approach to life and death, this possibility. You can connect with the spirits, people who are already gone. And that's the magic realism.
The first written records of sauna bathing date back to the 13th century. In the past, saunas were used as birthing rooms, as they were the cleanest rooms in the house, and as a place to attend to the dying. They have also been used as smokehouses, which is how the smoke sauna tradition developed in southern Estonia. Unlike other wood-heated saunas, smoke saunas have no chimney so the sauna room and the space around it are filled with thick smoke as the sauna is heated. After waiting for an hour or two for the smoke to disappear, only heat and a light smell of smoke remain. During a session, which typically lasts several hours, water is thrown on the heated stones to produce hot steam-laden air, and bathers beat their bodies with whisks to scrub off their skin and stimulate blood circulation. After sweating, whisking, relaxing, and possible healing procedures, people cool themselves outside and rinse their bodies with water before the ritual is repeated. In 2014, the smoke sauna tradition of Vanna-Veeroma in southern Estonia was included in the UNESCO list of the intangible cultural heritage of humanity. The Estonian language is also chock full of sayings about saunas.
There is, for example, this kind of common term like naised saunas rääkisid. So women were talking in sauna. Even people who have no roots in smoke sauna culture or maybe don't even like sauna, they know that phrase. It actually reflects how deep is this tradition of sisterhood.
Like during her own healing journey, Hinz had to overcome many physical and emotional challenges while making the film. Shooting a total of around 200 hours of video material, much of it in confined, baking and steamy spaces, meant having to constantly switch lenses, protect themselves from burns from the hot cameras, and try not to pass out. Despite all of this, spending days together inside smoke saunas made the whole sisterhood healthier, safer, and more empowered, Hinz says.
My granny always used to say that, when we have traumas, they're like frozen water, and sometimes we can find ourselves in deep, dark winter where just ice falls. But we should always remember that inside that ice, there is the power to flow again. We just need warmth and safety to melt our traumas. And in the end, that's what smoke sauna is about.
Ben Bartke, DW in southern Estonia.
Now, if like me, you are wanting to find out where that film will be screening next, then the address you need is smokesaunasisterhood.com. And if you've been left wanting to experience Estonia's UNESCO-protected smoke saunas firsthand, then visitestonia.com is probably as good a place to start as any. That's it for our Women's Day special. We'll be back with normal programming next week. This programme was produced by Helen Seeney with help from me, Kate Laycock, and sound engineer Michael Springer. Inside Europe comes to you from DW in Bonn, Germany.